I'd like to call to order the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee. May we start with a roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Bofi?
Present.
Dr. Bofi is present. Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Davis is present. Ms. Edmonston?
Present.
Ms. Edmonston is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Holloway? Ms. Holloway is present. Dr. Jones?
Present.
Dr. Jones is present. Ms. Lewis? Ms. Lewis is present. Ms. Orange Jones?
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Rock?
Present.
Mr. Rock is present. Dr. Thomason?
Present.
Dr. Thomason is present. Ms. Voce?
Here.
And Ms. Voce is present. And Ms. Heredia?
Here.
Ms. Heredia is present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. What's the first item on our agenda?
Your consent agenda is ready for your approval, adding item 4.1.
I need a motion.
So moved.
So we have a motion by Ms. Orange Jones and a second by
Second.
Ms. Holloway. Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your first item is on page 1, item 2.1, consideration of the authorization of 9 additional course providers for the Course Choice Program for 2016-2017. The department recommendation is to approve.
Is there a motion? Dr.
moved.
Jones and a second by Mr. Rock. I'll turn to the superintendent for some background on this item.
Members, this program, which was created 4 years ago, allows for school systems to draw down funds that then are used for accessing courses that are provided by private providers or by higher education providers. Your role as a board is to authorize the existence of these providers so that school systems can choose to draw them down. Every school system receives a specific amount of money from the MFP to do so. They can then choose from a list. You are simply adding to the list based on today's request. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Do we have any comment cards on this item?
No, ma'am, we do not.
What about a discussion from the board? Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 9, item 2.2, consideration of the fall 2015 reading report. The department recommendation is to receive the report and direct the LDE to submit the report to the House and Senate Committees on Education.
We need a motion. Ms. Orange Jones.
Second.
Ms. Voce. Board members, do you have any questions about this item?
I might have just one.
Superintendent White?
Members, there's been a fairly long-standing practice, and some of you have worked on this issue, of using the Dibbles assessment to meet a statutory requirement that early elementary literacy be measured and that it measure progress. And as the standards and curricula have changed of school systems, some school systems have asked to use different assessments to make this measurement. We've allowed that. I think that under this board at some point we should evolve further than that, which is to evolve toward an assessment that is optional for optional use, but in primary grades that measures more of the whole child's literacy skills rather than Dibbles, which has a fluency dimension, but is very limited at the end of the day in its holistic application. I also think that we should evolve toward a suite of assessments that educators find more useful in determining whether or not just their kids are on a certain level, but whether their kids are truly developing the whole set of skills across a whole range of standards. So I want you to know that this report is based on a specific assessment, but that assessment is not required in the law, and we should evolve toward what we think are a more holistic set of assessments that school systems can use for optional use, and that maybe are informative of educators' practice to a greater degree than Dibbles is. This is not something you need to consider now. It's just something that I raised for you because I think that the quality of the assessment the legislature has asked us to administer is important, and we will want to be in dialogue with you about this subject over the years.
Ms. Voce?
And I know we've been having discussions about those alternate assessments, and I know that many of us are piloting some of those in K-2. Do you know when we will maybe get a report on
Yes.
that or take a look at what that data shows?
Yes, I'm actually going to be asking the superintendents for a, kind of like we did a month or two ago, a whole group meeting, hopefully going to do that in mid-February, where we can discuss the shape of an RFP that will take some of the learnings from those pilots and try to put them into an RFP for an improved set of assessments.
Are there comments from other board members? Is there any objection to the motion? Ms.
Probably have just a
Edmonston?
question, yes. The core would be the percentage of kids that are attaining according to the DIBELS, is that correct?
Yes,
Strategic would be those that are having some issues, and intensive would be
correct.
the ones that really, okay?
Correct.
Because there's a lot of schools that have a real high percentage of intensive.
There are, and at the same time, what you see is and this is part of my concern, what you see is a mismatch between the percentage of kids achieving core and then ultimately the percentage of students who on the state test are measured as being on track to post-secondary readiness. Now, that's not to say that in third grade you can measure a kid's readiness for post-secondary, but our standards align through the grade levels, pre-kindergarten through college. And it's fair to say that there's a mismatch between what DIBELS says is ready versus what third and fourth grade assessments say is ready. That's generally because they test different skills. And we think that we should begin to align those instruments so that our kindergarten, first, and second grade teachers are receiving a more informative instrument. I think an unsaid thing, and something I hope this board will address, and I will urge that you do, is that of all teachers, probably kindergarten, first, and second grade teachers are the ones that receive the least guidance from as it regards the achievement of state standards. And at the same time, they are the ones in a way that are charged with the most challenging technical task. We have to change that, and I think that starts with how we measure learning in the first place.
Dr. Jones?
And I've got old man memory here. I'm trying to remember. We have some of the same problems with DIBELS that we had with the whatever it was we used before that, and I can't remember what it was we used before it. But essentially, the outcome depends often as much on the skill of the person given the DIBELS assessment as it does on the actual results of it. And that's the concern I have with DIBELS or any of the other ones are that standing by itself, it is wide open to misinterpretation because of the fact that, and you can notice this over time, the same thing happened to the previous thing that we used before DIBELS. Over time, they got better and better and better, but the question were the kids really getting better and better and better, or was it the skill of the person given the test getting better and better and better? So that's a concern I have, and I do think that hopefully at some point in the future we'll look at some other options as well.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members about this item? Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion passes. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 65, item 2.3, consideration of a discussion regarding elementary music programs in Louisiana. The department recommendation is to receive.
So we're going to start, I believe, with an introduction by Superintendent White, and then we also have our State Teacher of the Year here with us to provide some information on this item.
Members, I won't steal Kelly's thunder, but I will simply say this. You have on this board every year a role for the State Teacher of the Year. And it has been my observation of the two past boards that I've worked with that we have underutilized that role. I think oftentimes we get caught up in issues of very arcane policy, and we neglect drawing on their very intensive academic experience. So this year, when the State Teacher of the Year was awarded in July, and it was a music teacher, I was particularly thrilled because of all states that should have a robust discussion about the quality of music instruction, it should be Louisiana. And I very much appreciate our state's Teacher of the Year being willing to take out of her personal time, knowing that she's quite busy otherwise, to dig in on this issue, and we welcome your report.
Thank you, Superintendent White. and members of the board, as Mr. White stated, I definitely want this year to make a positive impact. With only 6 months left in this position, I really want to take this time to focus on the educational needs, I believe, of our students in Louisiana. Along with that, I do hope that this will lead to further roles for our future State Teachers of the Year. In your agendas, I included a list of recent research studies regarding music education and academic achievement. But truthfully, I did not need that information to prove to me the power of music education. As a child, I actually suffered frequently from ear infections, and this severely impacted my ability to hear and speak. There would be a point in time in my life where I would have been too terrified to get up here and speak because of that. But thankfully, I had a wonderful elementary music teacher who not only proved to me my musical abilities and strengths, she helped me to develop my listening skills and my speaking abilities. So now my teaching certificate gives me the opportunity to teach from kindergarten to the 12th grade. I've chosen to teach at the elementary level because I believe that this is where I can have the greatest impact on a child's life. In 15 years, I have taught over 3,500 students, and from a variety of abilities ranging from the gifted to the severely disabled. Each child, I've shown them their musical strengths, but I'm also teaching them so much more. Throughout my curriculum, you will find math, ELA, science, social studies, PE, art, everything is interwoven throughout the curriculum. The purpose of elementary music is actually to not prepare them to join band or choir. Although my students are certainly going to have those foundational skills that are needed, the true purpose is to prepare students for life so that music will play a vital role in their adult lives, whatever it may be, and that they will also have the tools to be the creative, critical thinkers that we truly need for this 21st century. So music also, as Mr. White says, plays such an extremely vital role in our culture and economy in Louisiana. I am actually from Alabama, and I was drawn to Louisiana to teach because of the music here. But I've seen through involvement in professional music organizations that access to elementary music varies greatly throughout the state. So today I'm asking your help as a representative of an unfocused discipline to get a greater understanding of our elementary music programs so that we can identify measures that need to be taken to improve the quality and degree of such programs. So in your agendas, I also included the recent ESSA items that I think also refer to music education and some questions I think that are very important for us to consider today. For example, which elementary schools actually do offer elementary classes? I know in St. Tammany Parish, every school has elementary music, but there are other parishes where maybe 1 or 2 schools might have it, and there's some parishes where there are none. So just trying to identify the amount of elementary music programs throughout the state. Also, we need to identify the actual number of minutes that students are receiving instruction. At my school, I teach my students once a week for 40 minutes. A lot of teachers see their classes just once a week for 30 minutes, but I do know music teachers that see them twice a week for 30 minutes. I recently met a music teacher from New Orleans that saw her classes every day for 5 weeks for an hour, and that was it for the rest of the year. So it varies greatly just in the amount of minutes. Are there actual certified music teachers teaching these classes? Some I have met are, and then there's many that are not. Some are working toward their certification. So what can we do to make sure that we're having certified, qualified teachers in these positions? Are any of these schools receiving arts grants to help with the instructions? And just looking at the whole school, are classroom teachers integrating art? And I think it's really important for us to identify the schools that are doing great work at arts integration programs, so that we can use these schools to be a representative of what we would like the other schools to build to. And most importantly, I want to consider the barriers for implementing elementary music programs. So is it the funding, training? Is it accountability questions? Is it our standards? Do they need to be revamped? Is it our resources? I know a lot of times it's time constraints that people consider, but are there other barriers that we need to look at today? So if any of you have any questions for the answers for those questions, it would be very helpful.
I think the problem is we lack answers, which is why I appreciate you for identifying here. I was curious as to whether or not you and the superintendent had talked about a potential next step for this conversation?
We would like to actually conduct a survey of the elementary schools just so that we can get this kind of information in our hands so that we can go through the data, especially looking at what people consider to be the greatest barriers, I think is very important for us. Because if we know what the barriers are, then we can identify things that can help overcome those, I believe.
I would agree. Upon talking with Kelly and the research that she has developed, I'm compelled that we need to build more of a base of knowledge about this issue. And if there were a motion to that effect, our agency could take the next couple of months, study the issue, not just from her perspective and from the study's perspective, but across the elementary schools. If we're really in a situation where elementary school music is simply not a priority, then we have a child development problem in our state that needs to be addressed, and we're willing to start building a fact base around it.
Ms. Boche?
I think it's just going to be a wonderful initiative. In St. Bernard, we place a heavy emphasis on our music and arts program, and this may be a little far afield, but I'm just going to say it anyway at this point, Superintendent White. But through the Jumpstart Initiative, we had formed many different pathways for career diplomas, and one that we had proposed in our region had to do with the Performing Arts Academy and a performing arts pathway, but it was rejected for not, I don't know about the high demand job piece and those different types of pieces from the Workforce Commission. And I would like the department maybe to work with us a little bit more extensively to see if we could push that movement forward, because especially in Louisiana as a whole, but in the southern part of Louisiana, we have great opportunities for our students as we train them both in the performing arts and the technical aspects which support those performing arts. And I would like to see that as one of the pathways for the career diplomas in our educational arena. So I would ask maybe that we would take a look at that a little bit more extensively.
Always happy to take a look, Superintendent.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Was the superintendent asking for a motion, and did Ms. Boche just make a motion?
I think that Ms. Boche went on a slightly different path than what the superintendent was talking about, related but a little different. So we are interested in discussion from the board and also a motion from a board member.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we direct the department to study this issue, particularly along the lines of the suggestions from our speaker.
I would second the motion. Yeah.
Thank you.
I do have a comment.
Yes, Ms. Orange Jones.
Oh, wait, Kelly, before you leave, two quick comments. One, thank you so much for the presentation. I think you've figured out a unique way that you can add a tremendous amount of leadership capacity to our board during the time that you're serving. And I just want to say I personally just appreciate your example in terms of reimagining even what the role of Teacher of the Year could be on our board, and setting an example for future Teachers of the Year and using your unique strengths. Also, just as a representative from New Orleans, I personally just think this is so important. Too often we see the unlimited capacity of our children, particularly around the arts, and experience through working with schools over time just how many of these constraints do in fact limit what I know many of our educators also see and want to be able to act on. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity.
I would like to
again
add just
today.
one comment too. I'm from Alabama too. I'm from Talladega,
really?
Alabama. And I had a fourth grade music teacher that made a big difference in my life. Ms. Wickerson. It taught us the value of music, respect different types of music. It enriched my cultural development, and I think we need more of that. So thank you for coming, and congratulations on being Teacher of the Year.
Thank you very much again.
I'll just say, Ms. Stomps, how proud I am of you. Just to let everybody else know, she will meet with the State Teachers of the Year from across the country at the end of this month. And a lot of that program is focused on the professional development of teachers, but also helping teachers find their voice and how they can best advocate for students. So I'm always impressed with our State Teachers of the Year. They're wonderful people in my mind, but to see a state teacher of the year take the initiative to do something like she's done, even before she has met all of her state teachers of the year from across the country to help her find her voice and find a path forward, is absolutely exceptional. So we look forward to your future contributions, and thank you for everything you do in the classroom every day.
Thank you. Thank you again for this.
Yes. Well, we had a motion. Did we get a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Garvey and a second by Mr. Davis. And we had the original motion to receive. I think we started with that. We didn't? No? Okay. Would someone like to receive the report that we just received? Ms. Holloway and a second by Mr. Davis. Thank you very much. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 72, item 3.1, consideration of an annual report regarding alternative education schools and programs. The department recommendation is to approve the report and to authorize the LDE to submit the report to the governor and to the House and Senate committees on education.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Ms. Boche motioned and Dr. Jones second. Are there questions from the board? We do not have any comment cards. Do we have any discussion from the board? Objection. Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 83, item 4.2, consideration of an updated report on the Early Childhood Care and Education Advisory Council. The minutes of the January 8, 2016 meeting have been distributed. The department recommendation is to receive.
So moved.
Mr. Davis moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Edmonston seconds the motion. Are there questions or comments about this? Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 86, item 5.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 118, statewide assessment standards and practices related to parent access to student assessments. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
Ms. Orange Jones moves. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Thomason. Superintendent, will you talk our board through the process of the notice of intent?
Sure. A policy that is created. So pretty much everything you voted on today so far has not been a policy. You've been voting on decisions to give people money, decisions to send out reports. Those are administrative issues. As I discussed with you when trying to brief you for the meeting, there's a distinction between strategic policy and just administrative issues. When we make a policy decision, and that becomes part of the regulations of the state, that goes through a multi-month process called the Notice of Intent process, or the Administrative Procedures Act process. This means that once you vote on today's policy, all you're really doing is authorizing a process of public consultation to go forward. You put this into a register. That register makes it public. The governor then can review it if he chooses to do so. The public can review it. And if the public comments on it, then it comes back to you for a final approval in a matter of months. So I'm saying all that to say that while this may not be the most controversial and discussed policy you will consider, there will be others. And that when those policies are voted on, they ultimately will then actually not be final. They go out through a process of consultation.
Thank you.
This is one of those, is that
This is
correct?
one of those, yes. Any change to a bulletin, Ms. Edmonston, is any
Sorry.
change to a bulletin,
Okay.
and this is an amendment
Okay.
to a bulletin,
All right, thank you.
goes through that process.
Okay.
Do we have any questions from board members? Dr. Jones?
I'm looking at the wording to the change to the bulletin there, the section 321. I'm a little confused. Oh, excuse me. I'm a little confused as to how a parent would actually do this. Would that require that parent to come to Baton Rouge, for example?
Yes,
It would require the parent to come to Baton Rouge.
yes.
Have we considered any other way where a parent could not have? I mean, it seems like an awful burden on if a parent wants to look at something that lives, say, in Claiborne Parish, they have to come all the way to Baton Rouge to look at those results, when in most cases all they want to do is just really look at it and see what it was. Is there any way we could have a procedure that would allow them easier access to it?
It's true. I should say first that this change in bulletin, and you'll often have this issue come up, is pretty much just a direct reflection of a statute that was changed. So that debate, for whatever it's worth, the discussion of the subject that you're raising, Dr. Jones, was had in the legislature. And here was the nature of the issue. The issue was that on the LEAP test or on the ACT or something like that, parents are saying, well, my child is being measured based on this. I'd like to see a copy of the test, which is, of course, a very understandable concern. Problem then becomes the minute that a question on a test that's administered to hundreds of thousands of young people gets into the public domain, all of a sudden people know what's on that test. And so, for example, when you take the ACT every year, you don't know which questions are going to be on the ACT. If you did, you would have an obvious advantage in taking the ACT. So there's a balance between access and privacy that needs to be struck, or security that needs to be struck. The compromise that the legislature reached on this, not the department but the legislature, is a process for viewing in person and viewing in a secure setting. And so, yes, Dr. Jones, you're right that the process that was ultimately hammered out is one that would require coming to Baton Rouge. I think we are certainly open to any further discussions about tests being made available in other locations, but it is fair to say that almost any time you would make it available somewhere else, you could conceive of an interested party having access to something that would give them an advantage over someone else.
May I follow up?
Please.
So even with that, say, for example, if you said to somebody who wanted to go to Shreveport, are you saying that staff couldn't take it to them and let them look at it there and kind of negate the issue of compromise of information and so forth? Or
I think it's certainly physically possible. I think, though, if you think about the just literally managing a process where hundreds of thousands of families or any individual citizen could say, I want to see this, please bring it to such and such location on such and such a date, it could be, I think, a real administrative challenge. So I'm not saying we wouldn't be open to a discussion about it. That was certainly an issue that was discussed in the legislature. But for now, this is where we are. If we want to keep talking about it, we should.
Okay, so, but if I understand what you're really saying, the legislature has already decided that issue. This is not something that's really open to you anyway. Would require a change to the legislation?
Well, the legislation says this is what the department shall do. It's not that the department couldn't do it otherwise, as you're suggesting. Obviously, our priority coming into it was to try to toe a hard line on security. And I recognize that others were trying to toe a hard line on access. Essentially, the legislature said, Department of Education, you must do this. It's not to say the Department of Education couldn't do something else.
So one last question. Approximately how many requests have you had to do this since this went in? Do you have any idea?
We have not had any. No.
Not had any?
No.
Are there any other questions about the item? Is there any objection?
Could I just say something? I think, Dr. Jones, that there's a possibility that the reason there haven't been many requests is because parents think that they really cannot see what's on the test. So I think that the general perception out there is that it's impossible for them to do that. I just wanted to add that.
Yes. Now, just before we go too far down the line, I need you to internalize just how imagine this scenario. What if every parent at a given school said, I want to go review the test?
Yeah, I understand that.
And let's say they come in and see the test. Well, the other 1,200 schools didn't have parents who all came in to see the test. Now, would that give that one school an advantage over the other schools? Would it be the same representation of the child's learning? Conceivably, if every parent went home and none of them discussed any single test questions with their children, perhaps. I'm not saying that anybody's acting in bad faith. All I'm urging is just extraordinary caution. We have a very delicate balance around the balance of fairness and security with the issue of access. I think parents were right to raise concerns about data privacy and issues of access, both of them. but I don't want to go too far so that we've totally compromised our ability to accurately measure things on the other side of it. And you could imagine even this I agree with Dr. Jones, very cautious solution. You could imagine even this one being abused, from my perspective.
Are there any other questions or comments? Is there any objection to this motion? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 88, item 6.1. Consideration of public comment received concerning the November 29, 2015 Notice of Intent for Bulletin 1508, Pupil Appraisal Handbook, regarding students with exceptionalities. The department recommendation is to receive the report and to direct BESE staff to proceed with the final adoption of the November 20th, 2015 Notice of Intent for Bulletin 1508.
Is there a motion to receive and direct the department?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a move. Sorry, my phone is responding to me. So we have a motion by Mr. Davis and a second by Mr. Rock. Are there questions about this item?
I would just highlight, members, that this is an example of the notice of intent process working, so that there was something put out on notice of intent, a public comment was received, the department with a staff person for Plaquemines Parish, the department met with that person, we believe understood that the issue did not have to do with the bulletin that was raised, but we're addressing the issue that she raised, and now it's coming back to you for a final adoption.
Thank you for pointing that out, Superintendent White. Are there any questions or comments about this item?
Well, Holly,
Yes.
Superintendent, I know that you probably feel like you did everything you could, but that's a scenario that comes up more often than people think.
Yeah.
And it is federal law that we have to do the interventions, correct?
It is.
Yeah. So I wish there was some way that we could work that out for kids that are at home and in school.
And are you talking about the issue that was raised by the staff person?
Yes.
Yeah, on the comment.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so the comments that she had, we think, are school specific. They're not related to the revisions that are to this policy that were approved in October. But she brought up, you're right, important areas, and you're right on the money that it is a critical thing, and we're working with her on addressing the issue.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. Any other board discussion on this one? Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. That was our last item. We are going to break for lunch. Dr. Jones, is it okay for us to break until 1 o'clock?